What's going on, everybody? Mortem here, this time bringing you a look at Sector Unknown, an upcoming CRPG that is set to launch into early access in, I believe, July, but just recently actually got a public demo via its prologue that was released on, I think, the 25th, but that's actually not what I'm bringing you in this video. A couple weeks back, the solo developer of this particular title reached out and asked if I wanted to take a look at it, and it took me a little while to get around to doing that, but that is actually what I'm bringing you, which is effectively an early preview of the early access launch. Now, if you've never heard of Sector Unknown, basically we are going to be put in the role of a prisoner who has escaped from a company called Star Frontiers, which is, I would say, your pretty standard far future spaceship company with far too many resources and power. We, with the aid of an AI that also no longer wants to work with them, managed to escape and crash land on a mostly deserted planet. However, we know full well that eventually Star Frontier is going to be coming and looking for us, as it has recently been pushed out of this particular sector we find ourselves in, and if we would like to survive, we basically know that we're going to have to gear up and fight back against them once they get here, which means in the meantime, it's all about preparation and getting everything as ready as possible, which comes down to, of course, doing the quests, controlling some companions, and doing our best to increase what is our war score. Basically our general preparedness for this upcoming invasion. So a few notes on that straight away. First off, when this game launches into early access, it will actually be mostly done. You'll be able to play almost the entirety of the game with a couple of exceptions. Things like the armor system, for instance, are going to be added in later. And some of the models and the like are not fully done. But beyond just that stuff, most of what the early access period is for is bug fixing, as it is, again, a solo developer and trying to incorporate at least a little bit of feedback. But as an early impression goes, I think it's already looking pretty good. Pretty much everything I've seen so far has multiple different ways to be completed. There's a whole bunch of optional stuff. For instance, in the prologue, I convinced a guard as I was escaping to also just leave this company behind, and he uses an escape pod to eventually wind up on the same planet that you do. And then, having gone to that location, I actually had the option to recruit that person as a potential companion. A similar thing happened with a bandit, where using some persuasion skills, I was able to turn that bandit into a companion. So already there's been quite a bit of choice and consequence involved in just about everything here. Some of that takes the form of skill checks in, of course, conversation and the like. Some of it comes through exploration. For instance, you can escape the prologue without ever fighting anybody, or you can actually try to fight everybody, as there is, of course, turn-based combat here. A couple of notes just on that specific thing. I'd be curious to know if a full pacifist run is possible, as I believe the developer is taking some inspiration from games like Colony Ship, where that was an option, of course. So given the fact that I've been able to avoid so much combat if I really wanted to, it'd be neat if you could take on a sort of leader role as you prepare all of these systems and planets for the upcoming invasion, while just avoiding combat entirely yourself. I personally would enjoy that framing at least, but the other concern I have about this overall setup is just the war score itself. The thing about handling stuff like this and making a sort of best option in terms of the war score reward means that you're inadvertently sort of creating a most efficient or best option in terms of preparedness. And if you don't do something to make those choices come with some drawbacks, then they can be a little underwhelming in the end. Not that that's necessarily the end of the world, mind you, but just a thought on the subject. As I've mentioned, we are an escaped prisoner, but we do get to decide what kind of prisoner we just so happen to be via the game's character creation. You'll be able to pick things like the reason you got sent to prison in the first place, alongside your character's overall personality to determine some bonuses you'll get. You can also distribute attribute and combat bonuses, which of course affects secondary skills and things like that. A fairly basic setup if you've played a lot of RPGs, but the big thing here really seems to be the skill investment, as it unlocks a whole host of options both in conversation and in exploration. But obviously combat is always an option. Combat is a little more basic, as it is simply an action point system. You use action points to both move and actually take actions, so you can perform as many actions or movement as you have action points until your turn is inevitably over. And while there does does seem to be a little bit of, options and tactics and whatnot. It seems on the minimalistic side, but probably to be expected with a solo developer. For instance, certain types of weapons can do things like use incendiary shots, different types of attacks, alongside things like melee weapons getting some different options as well. It's fine, but it's probably not going to wow anybody just on that particular factor alone. Now, as we're moving across these various planets, which will eventually involve getting a ship and traveling between them, which, from what I've seen, is supposed to also include spaceship combat, which might be a little bit different. So there is that at least, but each planet seems to largely be consisting of a simple overworld map where you'll travel to various different locations, fast travel style, taking on the game's various factions and things as you go. Along the way, you'll pick up all sorts of resources which can be used for things like crafting and upgrading the defenses of each individual planet, so there's plenty of stuff going on there. And each planet seems to have some measure of conflict here, like the starting one is bandits you have to deal with, which is where you can get one of your recruits. So it seems, of course, that choice and consequence alongside just the narrative at large is going to play a huge role here, and it does feel as a result of that combat might be a little bit on the secondary side, which if anything, I would guess if you like Colony Ship would probably be a pretty good point of reference for something like this. But to sort of start wrapping it up here, I would say, for the most part, I'm kind of impressed a single person made this, as it is pretty good overall. And while parts of it might certainly be a little basic, other parts are surprisingly robust, like the sort of distribution of available skills, like there was quite a lot of representation there in any given scenario. There are a variety, of course, of combat options, ways to build a character, things you could lean into, especially when you start bringing in the perks, which give you all sorts of different bonuses as you level up as well, with level ups allowing you to increase attributes which affect secondary stats, and then alongside perks which you get a set amount of points to put into every level. And thus I had a pretty good time with it, so much so in fact when this leaves early access I probably will wind up reviewing it. Certainly a good bit of potential right now, but for the moment, as far as the audience goes, you should be able to check out that demo, as that launched on, I believe it was the 25th of May. It is called the Sector Unknown Prologue, which I mentioned because it is a separate entry on Steam, so if you go to the Sector Unknown Steam page, you won't necessarily find that demo there. Otherwise, though, when it drops into early access, I might take a second look at it, see if there's been any changes, or I might wait until it actually launches in full to do the entire review process then. But one way or another, likely going to see more of this from me, and to that end, if you enjoyed this particular video, by all means, like, comment, subscribe, all the YouTube jazz. But regardless of any of that, truly, just thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. May you wander in wisdom and have an amazing day.